Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Wednesday, 21st May 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. United States. Rising Treasury yields, and as government debt sparked a downturn in major stock indexes on Wednesday, May 21st, 2025, with the S&P 500 experiencing its first loss in 7 days. Wall Street experienced significant losses, with the S&P 500 down 1.14%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average falling 1.57%, sliding more than 800 points, and the Nasdaq Composite losing 0.86%. The U.S. stock market crashed, suffering its biggest daily losses in a month. The Dow, S&P 500, Nasdaq, and Russell 2000 all experienced sharp declines. Dow futures looked to reverse from an 800-point sell-off. Asian equities tracked Wall Street's sell-off as its deficit fears grew. Mixed profit reports from retailers like Target and Lowe's also contributed to investor unease. The TX retreated from a record high as investors eyed the U.S. tax bill debate. The dollar and US bonds came under pressure amid global tensions and Trump's tax bill. Analysts are wary of its stocks amid Moody's US downgrade. Nestle CEO noted that US consumers are unsettled by the economic slowdown. Bitcoin reached record highs, topping $111,000, driven by optimism and easing US-China trade tensions, with analysts predicting a potential target of $150,000 in 2025. Gold prices also increased due to a weaker US dollar and as debt concerns, reaching a 2-week high. Ray Dalio warned that credit rating agencies don't account for the risk of countries printing money to pay debts, which would devalue bondholder investments. The EU is seeking to inject new momentum into trade talks with the US, sending a new trade proposal in an effort to secure a deal. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang criticized US AI chip restrictions on China as a failure, calling for a policy reversal and stating that the ban on H20 is ineffective. He urged the U.S. to ease AI curbs after what he described as a failure with China. A Chinese biotech firm secured a $6 billion deal with Pfizer for a lung and colorectal cancer drug. Pfizer will produce the drug in the U.S. and acquire a $100 million stake in China's Tariffs Bio. The U.S. and China trade truce grew fragile amid a war of words over chips. China. Building on the economic relationship between the two countries, a Chinese biotech firm secured a $6 billion deal with Pfizer for a lung and colorectal cancer drug. Pfizer will produce the drug in the U.S. and acquire a $100 million stake in China's Tariffs Bio. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang criticized US AI chip restrictions on China as a failure, calling for a policy reversal, stating that the ban on H20 is ineffective due to China's cost-effective power and ample land. The U.S. and China trade truce grew fragile amid a war of words over chips. US firms demonstrated a solid commitment to the Chinese market, with expansion pledges and new projects. European Union. Turning to Europe, the EU is seeking to inject new momentum into trade talks with the U.S., sending a new trade proposal in an effort to secure a deal. Arnault urged the EU to hold constructive talks with the US on tariffs. Deutsche Börse and Euronext stepped up their battle against IPO flight to the US. France and in France, Arnault urged the EU to hold constructive talks with the US on tariffs. France hopes for progress with the US at the G7 summit, even without a communique. Iran. Moving to the Middle East, oil prices slipped as a gain in US. Stockpiles overshadowed a report about a strike in Iran. South Korea. Finally, Dow futures look to reverse from an 800-point sell-off, with the Korean won hitting a 7-month high. China is actively advancing in several industries. XPeng's Hong Kong shares have risen substantially this year due to its strong position in the Chinese EV market, despite profitability challenges from intense competition. The nation is also competing with the US in developing next-generation battery technologies for electric vehicles. Chinese eye-tigers, such as Zhipu's Chatgong and Moonshot's Kimi, are being scrutinized for data collection practices through their chatbot apps, which have nearly 35 million monthly active users. Baidu reported a revenue jump amid China's AI development efforts. China is expanding the C919 jet network and integrating AI into its military capabilities, despite U.S. sanctions. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang stated that U.S. chip restrictions have nearly halved their market share in China, calling the restrictions a failure. To stimulate its economy, China is cutting the loan prime rate, LPR, to encourage lending and borrowing. Home prices in April 2025 dropped 4.6% year-over-year, signaling a real estate slump that is spurring interest in crypto. UBS reports that 18% of global family offices plan to increase their investment exposure to mainland China in the coming year. China is opening its health industry to international investors, and Jiangsu Hengrui aims to raise $1.27 billion in a Hong Kong listing. Cattle shares have surged in their Hong Kong debut due to the electric vehicle boom. China stocks have shown mixed performance, with support from sectors like mining and battery stocks. Finance leaders met in Shenzhen to explore new opportunities within China. The upcoming 8th CE is set to reinforce China's position as a key global business gateway. Uni Bioscience Group recently received NPA approval for diclofosol sodium eye drops, advancing dry eye syndrome treatment in China. Hedge funds have reduced their holdings in U.S. big tech while increasing investments in China, according to Goldman Sachs. In international trade, China and ASEAN have concluded talks aimed at strengthening their free trade agreement amidst ongoing concerns over U.S. tariff policies. The British Chamber of Commerce in China has noted growing apprehension among its members due to a challenging business environment, emphasizing that removing barriers could provide China with a significant advantage. China-US container shipping rates are expected to remain high through June. Turning to the United States, U.S. chip restrictions have significantly impacted Nvidia's market share in China, cutting it nearly in half, according to CEO Jensen Huang, who termed the curbs a failure. These restrictions are occurring amid ongoing U.S.-China trade and semiconductor tensions. U.S. fiscal concerns are impacting regional peers in Hong Kong markets. In the Middle East, Donald Trump's recent visit has resulted in AI investment deals with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. These deals have raised concerns about the potential for China to access critical technology through these partnerships. Finally, South Korea has secured a commitment from China to increase prices in exchange for providing tariff relief on steel. Japan's economic situation is complex, with exports to the U.S. declining nearly 2% in April due to U.S. tariffs, prompting Japan to reiterate its call for their removal. The country is also re-evaluating its time frame for achieving its budget goals. Japan's Nikkei index has faced downward pressure due to profit-taking and a stronger yen. Japan's stock market has seen fluctuations, with the Nikkei 225 closing lower by 0.58% on several occasions, influenced by profit-taking, yen appreciation, and sell-offs in U.S. stocks and bonds. There is also observation of Japan's potential response to rising super-long bond yields. Mitsuo experienced a surge in its stock price, while Metaplanet is reportedly the most shorted stock in Japan. Japan's government saw Agriculture Minister Taku Ito resign after controversial comments about receiving rice as gifts. This has created challenges for Ishiba as rice costs increase. In business news, Blue Owl Capital and EQT are planning to expand their reach to retail investors in Japan, and Tedding Enterprises has opened a Tokyo branch to improve its service network and launch a global distributor program. In response to the severe heat, Japan is temporarily waiving basic water charges for Tokyo residents. Regarding international relations, a delegation led by Sanjay Jha from Jeju visited Tokyo, emphasizing the shared commitment of Japan and India to peace and democratic principles. Finance leaders from Japan and the US are scheduled to meet in Canada to discuss ongoing tariff issues. The United Kingdom's economic landscape is marked by both challenges and opportunities. Marks & Spencer suffered an estimated £300 million loss from a cyber attack, disrupting online orders. A Bloomberg terminal outage temporarily impacted UK gilt and EU bond auctions. The FTSE 100 index remained largely unchanged as markets absorbed inflation data. One UK mid-cap stocks saw a decline, contrasting with the GBP USD exchange rate, reaching a yearly high due to rising UK inflation. Rayner expressed skepticism regarding the UK's target of building 1.5 million new homes. A person discharging managerial responsibilities at On the Beach Group sold shares on the London Stock Exchange. Turning to the European Union, European stocks exhibited resilience amid trade optimism. The EU, alongside the UK, has implemented additional sanctions against Russia. Ukraine has urged the EU to adopt stricter sanctions against Russia, especially given the uncertain US stance. The EU has encouraged Trump to impose sanctions on Moscow, especially after threats to abandon peace talks with Putin. A UK-EU agreement focuses on defense jobs. Cisco's CEO expressed optimism about the European market's growth potential due to AI. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues to escalate. Putin recently visited the Kursk region for the first time since its recapture from Ukraine. Ukraine claimed that drone attacks humiliated Putin, leading to the shutdown of Moscow airport. Moscow airports were temporarily shut down following reports of downed drone. Ukraine's drone attack on Moscow involved 3 UAVs, which were reportedly intercepted by Russian air defense systems. Trump suggested that Ukraine and Russia should resolve the war independently, emphasizing trade with Moscow. In the cryptocurrency sphere, Bitcoin's price reached a new all-time high, driven by improved market sentiment. Canada's TETS experienced a decline, ending a 10-session winning streak. India's stock market saw considerable volatility, initially plummeting on May 22, with the Sensex dropping over 800 points and the Nifty 50 dipping below 24,550. Gift Nifty trends pointed to a negative opening for the Indian benchmark index, hovering around 24,775, a discount from the Nifty futures previous close, before fluctuating slightly around 24,783. However, Indian equity benchmarks later reversed a 3-day losing streak, driven by the financial and pharma sectors, leading to gains in both the Sensex and Nifty, with the Nifty 50 rising 0.52%. Indocent rebounded amid speculation that the bank has resolved accounting issues, while Oil India reported a 30% increase in quarterly profit. Contrarily, FMZ giant Colgate-Palmolive India reported a 6.5% decline in Q4 net profit, accompanied by a revenue decrease. Short-term Indian bonds are performing favorably, fueled by expectations of a dividend windfall. India's wheat crop is projected to reach a record high, easing concerns about imports. REC Limited successfully raised €635 crore through a private placement of bonds. Earnings revival suggests a potential turnaround for Indian firms in fiscal year 2026, according to brokerages. India and Taiwan are collaborating on solar technology to convert carbon emissions into green energy. Opportunities for India and South Africa are emerging from Trump's trade policies. The country's foreign exchange reserves in 2025 are being closely examined for their current state and historical trends. Shifting focus to the United States, Donald Trump's position is complicating tariff negotiations with India, particularly concerning India's partnership with Apple, which he views as leverage. Russia's ruble neared its strongest level against the dollar since June 2023 on the Moscow exchange. The exchange saw varied performance across sectors like finance, oil and gas, and retail on May 21, 2025. Russia reported intercepting drones over Moscow, disrupting flights, and claimed 159 Ukrainian drones were down. Moscow's mayor stated a major Ukrainian drone attack was prevented. President Putin visited the Kursk region for the first time since claiming Ukrainian forces were expelled. Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine remain a topic of discussion. The Iranian parliament approved a strategic partnership agreement with Russia, enhancing bilateral relations. Europe's stock markets presented a mixed picture, initially dipping before recovering ground. The FTSE and KSA 40 both saw early declines. Milan stood out as the strongest market in Europe, boosted by Leonardo's performance. Overall, European stocks pulled back from recent highs amid underperformance in retail and luxury sectors. Corporate news took precedence over concerns about the U.S. credit downgrade. Later, European markets closed higher, contrasting with Wall Street's downturn. LVN has Bernard proposed trade concessions to Donald Trump to protect European jobs and avoid potential tariffs. Timur Turlov emphasized Cyprus's role as a European link to global markets at a business summit in New York. Bloomberg terminal services were restored after an outage that had disrupted European bond sales. Schroders predicts a flow of European funds toward Asia to diversify away from us markets. Arikas Deans announced a public webinar regarding its European green bond offering. South Africa's economic climate saw the rand nearing a 5-month high, boosted by anticipation surrounding the national budget and a meeting between President Ramaphosa and then U.S. President Trump. Inflation in South Africa edged up to 2.8% year-over-year in April, influenced mainly by rising food costs. In a notable exchange, President Ramaphosa responded to criticism from Trump with offers of trade deals, while Trump presented videos promoting unsupported claims of white genocide. The Democratic Alliance, DA, voiced conditional support for the newly released budget. Efforts to bolster the economy included the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, JSE, expanding its SME Rise initiative through collaborations involving the UK and nationwide roadshows. Additionally, regulatory oversight was evident as a financial watchdog placed conditions related to job creation, local ownership, content requirements, supply chains, and geographic location on the acquisition of multi-choice. Advancing technologically, South Africa introduced an AI-driven quantitative trading system spearheaded by Dr. Trevor Abramowitz. The nation also faces uncertainty in its motor industry. Asian markets presented a mixed picture, with some indices rising due to reports of a possible Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear sites, which also increased oil prices. However, most Asian shares decreased, mirroring Wall Street's decline. This was driven by concerns over increasing U.S. debt, a struggling tech industry, and trade concerns. Japan's Nikkei index fell and the gift Nifty indicated a negative start for trading. The losses in Asian equities followed the U.S. market sell-off, which was caused by increasing fears regarding the U.S. deficit. Qatar is at the center of a controversy surrounding the Trump administration's acceptance of a gift jet, which Democrats are scrutinizing for potential bribery issues, while aviation experts are questioning costs and schedules. Economically, Ashmore has expanded its presence by opening an office in Qatar, seeking closer ties with the country's investor base. The Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, of which Qatar is a member, is recognized for its robust performance in the global economic landscape. Across the Asia-Pacific region, markets have responded negatively to Wall Street's downturn, largely fueled by anxieties surrounding U.S. debt. New Zealand is preparing to release its 25 budget, an event that investors are watching closely. The budget is expected to outline specific allocations, creating clear winners and losers in different sectors of the economy. Canada is currently in talks with the United States concerning the Golden Dome defense system. In economic developments, Canada's largest pension plan has decided to abandon its net zero target. The Canadian stock market faced a decline as the S&P TSX Composite closed down by 0.83% on several days. Financial advice emphasizes tech stocks to bolster portfolios and dividend stocks to generate income due to possible tariff implications. Taiwan is currently enjoying an economic boom, largely propelled by advancements in AI technology. April 2025 saw record export orders, significantly boosted by the robust demand for AI solutions. This upward trajectory is mirrored in the Taiwan stock market, which is seeing substantial gains as silicon carbide suppliers draw considerable investor attention. Tech and financial sector purchases are additionally fueling a rise in Taiwan's share values. Adding to this success story, a former JP Morgan analyst has created a thriving quantitative investment firm in Taiwan, boasting an impressive 51% annual return. Samsung Display is actively pursuing opportunities within the Taiwan market, highlighting its QD OLED gaming monitors at the recent Computex trade show. Turning to the relationship between the United States and China, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has observed that U.S. chip export restrictions on China have inadvertently encouraged Chinese firms to ramp up their own domestic chip development initiative. Israel's escalating tensions with Iran are fueling market anxieties, especially impacting the energy sector. Bloody oil prices have spiked amid fears of supply disruptions stemming from a possible Israeli strike against Iran. Certain stocks are gaining attention as potential beneficiaries of the proposed Golden Dome missile defense project. This project is envisioned as a system mirroring Israel's defense architecture. Argentina's economy saw a slower pace of growth in March. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, private credit funds in Asia are eyeing billions in untapped retail demand in Australia, with similar strategies also being implemented in Japan. The Philippines is experiencing a governmental shakeup as President Marcos has directed all ministers to resign, signaling a bold reset. In conjunction with this, the Philippines-Australia Friendship Day is gaining traction. Shifting focus to Indonesia, analysts predict further interest rate cuts are on the horizon, fueled by a promising economic outlook. Neighboring Malaysia is striving for greater gender equality, aiming for 60% female representation. Singapore has issued a warning to foreign embassies, urging them to avoid actions that might provoke adverse reactions. Turning to Brazil, environmental regulations are being eased ahead of the UN Climate Summit. Concurrently, a bird flu outbreak is threatening the poultry industry and potentially impacting exports. Further south, Invipar, a Brazilian company, has hired an advisor to handle debt restructuring. In West Africa, USAID funding cuts have affected a local language learning program in Mali, which had previously enabled thousands to learn local languages. Across the Atlantic, the United States is considering tariffs on imported flowers, primarily from Ecuador, Colombia, and Canada, which could raise prices for consumers, but potentially benefit local flower farmers. Across the Atlantic, Portugal opposes any further expansion of Spanish banks within its borders. Finally, potential Republican tax legislation in the United States could spark a global tax dispute, potentially leading to retaliatory taxes on foreign companies operating in the U.S. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.